Hi, I'm Graham Robinson. Welcome along to Wellness for Men. I talk about childhood trauma that affects us in adulthood and focus on how men in their later stages, those men from 40s onwards, can start to experience problems and the reasons they do that. And each video, I'll look at a specific event or element that is happening that's causing them childhood trauma in their adult life. And today we're talking about the fawn response or fawning. Now, the fawn response, I'm sure you've heard of fight, flight, and freeze. And everybody has, if not heard of those all three together, has at least heard of one of them at some stage. Well, there is another that is called fawn response. Now, the fawn response is a response that is really only something carried by abused children. So if you've suffered childhood trauma, you will have this fawn response. It's particularly when our parents are either physically difficult with us, if they beat us, they hurt us, if they're unloving, or if they're abandoning us, if they're not there emotionally, even though they are there in the household. We create, as I've mentioned before, this different persona. And we also become very hyper vigilant. So we see danger everywhere. So instead of fight, flight, or freeze, now we may go into those at some stage. What the child creates is a fawn response. So if you can think of it as basically they may curl up and hope A, not to be hurt, and B, to stay as small as possible to not be identified for any issue. Now, that is basically what the inner child is doing. They are cringing and they are curling up to a point where they no longer have to respond or hopefully won't be hurt if they do respond. So what happens is that we need acceptance. All of us need acceptance. And if we don't get that in the family home, we end up having developing a whole range of traumas that play out in adulthood and control our adult life. Now, we may not even know that. For many of us, the abuse we suffered as kids may have seemed like, well, that's what happened. Johnny down the road or Sheila explains that she has the same things when we're at school. She talks about a dad hitting her or a mum hitting her. So does Johnny. Those are, seems like that's what happens with everybody. But also that, the father's never there, always off working, doesn't show love when they're at home. The mother may not show love. All of those are the things that we seem to accept as, well, that was just life. But it's not, it's abuse. It comes down to one simple thing. It is childhood abuse. Even though the parent may not see it as that, that is exactly what they're doing. And so when we feel that abuse, when we feel that lack of being loved, and we go into the fawning response, you will see us as adults do things like people pleasing, for example. We will want everybody around us to like us, no matter whether they're abusive to us or whether they're kind to us. So we want to please, and we will go to extreme levels of pleasing people around us. It also, we become in a position where even though we may have to endure abuse that others wouldn't, we do endure it because we want that person to change and to like us, and we believe they will. We have this belief that it doesn't matter what we do. Ultimately, in the fawning response, they will become somebody who will like us. Some of the other things that we may end up being doing include that we like to try and keep the peace wherever we are. So we will be peacemakers, and everybody thinks to a certain extent as an adult that, oh, so and so is always trying to keep the peace. That's great. But in actual fact, we're keeping it for ourselves because we get terrified, or our inner self gets terrified if there isn't peace, because we feel we will be the object of that unsettledness, of that lack of peace. We will become the target. And we don't and can't cope with that. We can't have people show disappointment in us. We strive for perfection, both in ourselves and around others when we're at work. We demand perfection from everybody around us, sometimes verbally, if not by our actions. And that, of course, is impossible. You can't have perfection by everybody else, and you can't really have perfection in your own right. We're always trying to make others happy. We constantly seek approval. These are some of the fawning behaviors that you may recognize in yourself. We will sacrifice our needs if somebody else has a demand. So as a simple thing, if we may have some sort of event that we planned we're going to, and somebody says, I need you to stay back, and we, or someone to stay back and do some work or do something else, we will be very quick to say, yes, I'll do it. Even though we don't want to, we have this need to make people happy and seek their approval. And so we'll sacrifice all of our needs. We also don't like disagreements or confrontations because when we get into them, we can't control our emotions. We go from 0 to 10 very quickly. And so a confrontation for us is a full-on argument, whereas many others can have a discussion, can settle it. If we have childhood abuse, we struggle to do that. We also have very little self-worth. And we rely on others to tell us that we have self-worth, but we still don't accept it. And so even when they tell us how good we are or give us compliments, we will push the compliments away. We will make some derogatory remark about ourselves or say we didn't really do anything. And of course, that means that we just can't accept that approval. It's not something that we feel comfortable doing. And we fear absolutely criticism. Now, all of these things are wrapped up, not individually. We get little bits of these things happen as different traumas are triggered through our adult lives. So you can't say this is happening today and that's going to happen tomorrow. They're a mix of all these different things. And childhood trauma is like that. It's a complete mix of everything that you do. And it's unfortunately not easy to untangle it. That's why I often say in these videos that you do need professional for help. You need to go to a therapist that works with childhood trauma. It is also one of those areas where self love really does help. Being kind to yourself. Now, talking to men, and certainly older men, they may go, what exactly do you mean by that? I don't understand that, or I don't want to know about that. Really, it's nothing more than just being kind to yourself, knowing that you are a good person, that you do the right thing, or, even sometimes wrapping your arms around yourself. I'll give you an exercise in a moment that will help, but wrapping your arms around yourself and just saying, I am good. The touch is really important. Just holding yourself is really important to show, because you're showing your inner child as well, that you are healthy and that you are good. The other thing that, of course, if you find yourself in a position where you don't want to do something, you're being asked, try and say no reasonably. Try and build some resilience around not being a people pleaser, not always saying yes when asked. But here we struggle to do it in a reasonable manner. So quite often what happens with a child and now the adult who is in a fawning or has had fawning trauma is that you end up sort of snapping at somebody and saying, no, I can't do it because, and you don't have a way of dealing with that and saying it just calmly and rationally, as many others do. It comes out and people then shy away and don't ask you anything. And of course, the end result is that you struggle to have connections with those people. The other thing is that, of course, we avoid speaking out, even when we disagree in a work meeting, amongst friends, maybe at the pub or in a party or whatever. We tend to avoid saying something that disagrees with somebody because, again, it comes back to us wanting to be liked. And of course, if you reflect on all of those things and think about how have I been impacted? Does it impact me? I'm not saying it will. Or we all have different childhood traumas. We all have different responses. Not everybody will have a fawning response, but in essence, you're most likely to have it somewhere in some behavior. If you can recognize that from what I've said, or you can certainly look up what the fawning response means, then try and modify that behavior, just little steps at a time, and try and work through some of those things so you're not always in that fawning response when some of these things happen. Now, today I'd like to give you an exercise. It's known as the butterfly hug, and it's a very simple one. So what I'd like you to do, if you'd like to, this is about self-soothing, really. Take a few deep breaths just to settle yourself down. Take deep breaths. And when you're ready, cross your hands over your chest, but you link like that, okay? So you link your thumbs like that, and then you have your fingers resting just below your collarbone. just there. And you just gently leave them there. Now, once your fingertips are below your collarbone, then all you do is tap with one hand and then tap with the other. So you tap with one, right? And then you tap with the other. Just for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then you can do it any way you like in your privacy of your own home. What it does is it just calms your body down. It soothes you down. There are many other things, including deep breathing in through your mouth, out through your nose, that will help. But if you do this for a little while, you'll find that even as you notice, my voice is starting to slow down. Your whole body slows down and you become sort of more regulated. Now, it's really a matter of simply if you're starting somewhere to get overwhelmed by something because of your trauma. If you're at work, maybe go into the bathroom, sit down and do that for a few minutes. If you're at home, go into a private room. Of course, if you're out, it's not as easy, but think about then if you're out, just deep breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, and that will help you manage your nervous system, which is what triggers us and sets us off. I'm Graham Robinson, and if you would like to check out what I do, it's at grahamrobinsonwellness.com. Also, my book, Shattered Innocence, Healing the Invisible Wounds of Childhood Trauma, available on Amazon, and my first book, which is just about my younger years and up until the age 13 when I left home, Pain, Loss and Desire. And next time on Wellness for Men, we're going to look at codependency. What does it mean? How do you get into codependency? And of course, how do you get out of it? I'll catch you next time.